So we're moving into part 2 of this, and this one is all about the emerald tablets. I'd like to also, always try to give credit where credit is due. I'd like to acknowledge that there's a guy named Billy Carson. I just met him at one of Neil's conferences, and this image comes from his book, and he wrote his own interpretation of these tablets, and it's actually quite good. And so, this would be a good version to get, the Compendium of the Emerald Tablets, A Beginner's Guide by Billy Carson. If you decide that you want to look into this more deeply, certainly I think it's worth it. And he's done a very good job. It's not a fat book. It's only maybe, about 220 pages, something like that. But it's totally worth getting. Okay, so here we go. So the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. So now this is the single emerald tablet. Remember me telling you that there were the many tablets that were written by Thoth at an earlier phase, and then there's one tablet that was written by Thoth when he was known as Hermes Trismegistus in Greece. So the Emerald Tablet singular is an ancient artifact that reveals a profound spiritual technology which has survived to this day despite centuries of efforts to suppress it. So, of course, I want to again point out that when they say the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, they're talking about this one tablet, and I'll show you some of the information on it. But Billy's book is primarily about the Emerald Tablets, and this presentation is primarily about the Emerald Tablets, plural. In Greece, when Thoth was known as Hermes, it was said to be only one tablet written by Thoth that condenses some of his wisdom and some of his laws, okay? And this is some of what's on there. This is truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. As above, as below, so above, and as above, so below. With this knowledge alone, you may work miracles. In other words, when we look at the atom, we can see the solar system. When we see that, we can see the galaxies. When we see the fractal geometries of the universe, we realize that these great patterns of geometry repeat, and that spiritual law affects physical beingness, that the astral plane overlights the physical plane. The astral plane is our thought life. It's our emotional life. So as above, so below. We can see it not only in nature and in physics, but also in the manifestation of our lives. Since all things exist in and emanate from the, that should be an emanate instead of emanate, from the one who is the ultimate cause. So all things are born after their kind from this one. Yes, right. So in other words, everything comes from God, or Atum. The sun is the father, the moon is the mother. The wind carried it in its belly. Earth is its nurse and its guardian. Okay. It's the father of all things. The eternal will is contained in it. Here on earth, its strength and power remain one and undivided. Earth must be separated from fire, the subtle from the dense, gently with unremitting care. There's 12 of these. Okay, so let me just say that this information was studied by Sir Francis Bacon, Sir Isaac Newton, Madame Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, many great Hermeticists throughout the Middle Ages and up into the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. So Thoth placed a portion of the Emerald Tablets long, long ago when Atlantis was up at the heart of Atlantis. He inscribed some of his knowledge or information in the heart of the city. The ones we want to look at, though, are called the 12 or the 13 or the 15 Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Some say they're 12, some say they're 13, and then some say that the translator divided them even into 2 more tablets to give sort of more information. So if you say the 12 tablets, the 13 tablets, you're not going to be wrong. These tablets were written by Thoth about his own journey of enlightenment, okay? And they were written in the Atlantean language. So this is why, you look at this and you're like, what does that all mean? I don't know. It's strange. Almost looks like a symbol language, doesn't it? But of course, if you didn't know what our ABCs look like, that would look like a symbol language too. Now, some believe these books, like the ones that were given to Joseph Smith with the angel Moroni in the Mormon church, were written on golden sheaves, okay, or sheaves of bronze or something like that, or golden plates. But it's said literally that beyond a shadow of a doubt, they actually were written on this emerald. They say that they consist of 13 tablets of emerald green formed from a substance created through alchemical transmutation. They're imperishable, resistant to all elements and substances, and in effect, the atomic and cellular structure is fixed with no change ever taking place. Upon them is engraved Thoth's teachings in the ancient Atlantean language. These characters respond to attuned thought waves, releasing the associated mental vibrations into the mind of the reader. In other words, somebody reading them, they experience almost like a telepathic transmission. That's a pretty interesting thought, that that there's an energy that comes off of them that downloads what they mean. The original emerald tablets were hidden under the Great Pyramid of Giza by Thoth after he left his kingship there. Then in 1200 BC, Egyptian priests were instructed to carry the tablets out of Egypt to the Americas and to all former Atlantean colonies. Now, when Atlantis broke up, there were 10 colonies, certainly Central America, South America, North America. Those are three. England, the Pyrenees, Egypt, six. Spain and Portugal, that area, that's seven. Thera, which is now Santorini, that's 8. So I can't tell you where the other 10 were, but definitely Ireland as well. Ireland, was uh, Ireland and England both. So the priest then hid the tablets of Thoth after they went to take them to the Americas beneath an unmarked Mayan temple. In the Americas, Thoth became known as Quetzalcoatl, or the Great Feathered Serpent, or Kukulkan. Okay. The tablets were rediscovered in 1923 by a man named Maurice Doreal, who was instructed by Thoth to retrieve them. Thoth told him how to find the ancient Mayan pyramid and get the tablets, and then how to translate them. Doreal completed his translations in 1925 and then was told to take the original emerald tablets back to Egypt and to deliver them to the doorway of the Halls of Amenti 3,300 years later. In other words, he went down, he got them from South America or Central America, Mayan, I imagine Central America. He worked with them for 2 years translating them, and then Thoth told him to return them to under the Great Pyramid of Giza. There's a secret entrance there that goes down into the Halls of Amenti. And so he was to deliver them to the doorway of the Halls of Amenti, not go into the halls themselves, but to the doorway, which would have been deep underground. Okay. Doreal arranged the tablets into 13 chapters and then supplemented them with 2 more chapters, bringing the count to 15. And this is an overview of them. And towards the end of this, once we've been looking at information about them, I will show you this again, but let's just take a brief review. Almost everything I'm going to show you is going to come from tablet 1. Okay, and there's a lot. So each one of these tablets are quite involved. So this talks about his history. This one talks at length about the Halls of Amenti, which is a very big mystery and a big subject in itself. The keys of wisdom, now he gets into deeper wisdom. He talks about the dweller of the threshold here. This was a temple and island, Udal in Atlantis, where only the highest initiates and the gods could go. Keys of magic, the 7 lords, these are the lords of time that sit in the Halls of Amenti. The keys to the mysteries, the key to freedom of space, the key of time, the key of above and below, cause and effect, the key of prophecy, the keys of life and death. And that's 13, and then these are the supplementary ones, Atlantis. It's a lot. It's really a lot. So what do the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean tell us? Let's start at the beginning. They speak of a time thousands of years ago when Atlantis was in its heyday, and we reached, as a human species, a very high point in human civilization. We certainly had extraterrestrial beings that looked totally human down here, from the Pleiades, from the Sirius system, from Nibiru, from the gods, and so forth. But this was a time when Thoth actually ruled Atlantis, which went on for thousands of years. But as you'll see, he was very much involved in spiritual consciousness. So this would have been during probably the second age or the final age of Atlantis. You know, we're still having to try to figure out our times. Atlantis was originally a continent, in an entire continent in the Atlantic Ocean, of immense beauty. And I've done a great presentation for Portal to Ascension on Atlantis, where I really go into this in great depth. So this was a place of enormous beauty, and you can sort of see the outlines of where the continent was originally. But then what happened, well, verdant and tropical. Let me show you some of these gorgeous images. These actually are remnants of Atlantis. They are the Azores. The Azores are off the coast of Portugal. And this is remnants of the last incarnation of Atlantis. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Throughout its history, it went through 4 major destructions. So from about 100,000 to 51,000 years ago, there was a great civilization on a continent. And then they used a antimatter device to get rid of some kind of giant dinosaur-like animals. And they unfortunately split the continent into 5 large islands, or continent islands. And then that stabilized until about 28,000 years ago. 2 of them went down, and there were only 3 left. And then from 28,000 to 22,000, there were 3. 22,000 years ago, all but 1 went down. So the Atlantis that Plato describes is the one from 22,000 years ago till about 12,000 years ago, or 11,700 years ago. So around 51,700 years ago, Atlantis broke up into a series of 5 islands. Then it broke up again around 28,000. And then 22,000 years, it became only 1 large continent island. And this is the one that we hear about in the Timaeus and in Critias, which were written by Plato. Okay. And this is actually a depiction. It had a mountain ridge. This is now the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Okay. And this became a great civilization for a long time. This was divided into 10 provinces with a central center of Atlan and Poseidia. These are different depictions people have made of the waterways where they were linked. Obviously, they were a shipping, a naval civilization. And this is actually from the Damanhurians, who went back in time to be able to look at pictures of this. You can see pyramids and racetracks and housing, and then there was a temple in the very center. But Atlantis was a great civilization for thousands of years, even before that. It was peaceful and in balance for a long time, and just, you know, all the things that we think of as Atlantis being. And they were great temples that were aligned with the stars, with the astronomy. Temples to the sun, to the moon, to the Pleiades, to Sirius, to Andromeda, to Orion, so that we would be in harmony with the rest of the universe. Temples for healing, temples for spiritual attunement, and they worked with crystals. And there was one great crystal called a fire crystal. This crystal had enormous power, and this is the one that got weaponized, that created the antimatter explosion that broke up the continent. However, these fire crystals were very, very powerful, and they remind us of the flower of life. That's what they're very much like. They built an energy grid of pyramids all over the planet, and of course I've done presentations on Antarctica for Portal to Ascension, where I literally show, you know, some of the 750,000 pyramids that we've now discovered all over the planet. They established temples and places of worship, and some of the highest and best qualities of humanity was brought forward. So we start now with Tablet 1. I, Thoth the Atlantean, Master of Mysteries, Keeper of Records, Mighty King, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass back into the halls of Amenti. These records of the mighty wisdom of great Atlantis I set down for the guidance of those who are to come after. In the great city of Kior on the island of Undal, in a time far past, I began this incarnation. Not as the little men of the present age did the mighty ones of Atlantis live and die, but rather from aeon to aeon did they renew their lives in the halls of Amenti, where the river of life flows eternally onward. Great were my people in the ancient days, great beyond the conception of the little people now around me, knowing the wisdom of the old, seeking far within the heart of infinity knowledge that belonged to the earth's youth. Wise were we with the wisdom of the children of light who dwelt among us. Strong were we with the power drawn from the eternal fire. So he's talking about these firestones that were literally used, the eternal fire, to restore health and age, so that people age very slowly and that they gained great knowledge and wisdom. And of all of these, greatest among the children of men was my father, Thoth May, or Inky, keeper of the great temple, link between the children of light. We who dwelt within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands, mouthpiece after the 3 really initiates, or of the dweller of Undal, speaking to the kings with a voice that must be obeyed. Now, the dweller of Udal is something that we're going to be talking about. He's a very interesting character. He's a high spiritual being who's come down from a higher plane and who dwells between the physical world and the spiritual realms. And that's why they call him the dweller of the threshold. And he chose 3 spiritual initiates to act as interfaces between himself and the rest of humankind. Grew I there from a child into my manhood, being taught by my father the elder mysteries, until in time there grew within the fire of wisdom, until it burst into a consuming flame. Not desired I, but the attainment of wisdom, until on a great day the command came from the dweller of the temple that I be brought before him. Few there were among the children of men who had looked upon that mighty face and lived, for not as the sons of men are the children of light when they are not incarnate in a human body. Chosen was I from the sons of men, taught by the dweller, so that his purposes might be fulfilled. So this is pretty interesting. Let's look at this. And not with a, for not as the sons of men are the children of light when they are not incarnate in a physical body. In other words, these are beings from the higher realms, the children of light, who come down and take a physical body in order to be able to interact and participate with us. But they are, they're really beyond the physical world. These children of light were the teachers of mankind, giving knowledge to raise human consciousness. Now, it's hard for us to know, were these the gods? Were these beings higher than the gods? The gods appear to be physical. And there are many things that make us think that. They built things, they had technology, they had spaceships, they had sex with human women. These appear to be beings that are higher than the gods. That's what I would call them. Beings maybe from the 5th dimension or the 6th dimension that have come down in order to help humanity move to another level. These celestial teachers dwelt on the beautiful island of Udal, away from the hustle and bustle of regular society, meeting only with the 10 kings of Atlantis and the higher initiates whenever they chose. So they oversaw that there would be no war. At the center of them was an incorporeal being of light that Thoth calls the dweller on the threshold. This was his teacher. This master chose 3 priests or candidates to serve as the interface between himself and the outside world, and only special initiates were chosen to study with him. Thoth was one of those. So there on the great throne beheld I the dweller, clothed with a light and flashing with fire. He spoke to me, "Here ye shall dwell as one of my children, keeper of records gathered by wisdom. You shall be the instrument of the light from beyond." I answered, "Give me your wisdom that I might be a teacher of men." Long I dwelt in the temple of the dweller until at last I was one with the light. He called me Thoth before him. Take all your records. Take all your magic. Go forth as a teacher of men. You shall be a light throughout all the ages, hidden yet found by the enlightened men. So long ages I dwelt in the temple, learning ever and ever more wisdom until I too approached the light emitted from the great fire. Taught me he the path to the halls of Amenti, the underworld, where the great king sits upon should be his throne of might. Deep I bowed in homage before the lords of life and the lords of death, receiving as my gift the key of life. Free was I of the halls of Amenti, bound not by death to the circle of life. Okay, so what's happened here? He's an initiate. He's studying. The dweller has chosen him from among everyone to become this sort of immortal being that will be free of the cycle of life and death so that he can remain as a teacher to people who are truly seeking enlightenment from a pure heart. Okay. But then he winds up being taken down underground into this underground labyrinth called the Halls of Amenti. And here, as we're going to discover, there are 32 powerful beings, 24 in a circle and 7 or 8 in a circle around a fire of life. And these beings are lords of time. They come from the future. They took human bodies and they preserve those bodies, and they periodically take incarnation as maybe human geniuses in order to encourage humanity to move to the next stage of its evolution. So those just deep I bowed in homage before the lords of life and the lords of death. That's who they are, these 32. Receiving as my gift the key of life. The key of life meaning you don't have to die. Free was I of the halls of Amenti, bound not by death to the circle of life. So they gave him the key to how to not have to die. Okay. And this is, of course, just an image. I do the best I can to give you some fun images for this, but of course, they're not usually making images exactly of this on the internet. So, far to the stars I journeyed, and now he's talking about soul travel here, not in a physical ship. Far to the stars I journeyed until space and time became as naught. Then, having drunk deep of the cup of wisdom, I looked into the hearts of men, and there I found greater mysteries and was glad. For only in the search for truth could my soul be stilled and the flame within be quenched. Down through the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste of the cup of death and return again in the light of life. He's talking about reincarnation. He would see the people around him die, and then, the next century they'd come back, or the 20 years later, 50 years later, or 3 centuries later, they would reincarnate, and he would recognize the soul that was from the past incarnation. Now, in one of the chapters of the Emerald Tablets, he talks in depth about his journey to the stars. He talks about going to planets that were more primitive than ours, some that were more advanced than ours, some that were on the last vestiges of human life, some that could literally manifest and create literally through just like the wave of their hands or through thought, many that were telepathic, some that were more primitive, okay, some that were at our same level. So he talks about his journeys through these different planetary systems, realizing that always, with all of them, the souls are the same. We're going through this evolutionary process as civilizations, and when we keep falling back into the same rut, then the masters have to figure out something to do to move us out of the same cow path so we don't keep making the same mistakes. That's important. Gradually, from the kingdoms of Atlantis, passed waves of consciousness that had once been one with me. In other words, people that were more conscious, that were aligned with his desire for knowledge, only to be replaced by the spawn of a lower star. In other words, people who were not interested in spiritual knowledge. Maybe materialism, maybe greed, power, sex, who knows, the usual. In obedience to the law, the word of the master grew into flower. So, in other words, when a civilization is no longer going towards the light and becomes self-destructive and destructive to everyone around it, the law, obedience to the law, it's got to be taken down. either through natural causes, like earthquakes or meteor strikes or tidal waves, or it can't be allowed to continue if the people aren't going to evolve, if they're going to devolve. Downward into the darkness turned the thoughts of the Atlantean, until at last in his wrath arose from his Agwanti the dweller. In other words, this spiritual master teacher, who had been for probably tens of thousands of years holding the consciousness for Atlantis to grow, once it began on its devolutionary instead of evolutionary spiral, the dweller said, it's time. What were they doing? Well, kind of the same thing we're doing today. Genetic manipulations, raping the earth, overuse of energy resources, exploitation of people and animals. The same thing we're doing today, which does not bode very well for us, does it? So what began to happen were climate changes, volcanoes, geologic instability, the overuse of energy systems, and eventually a cataclysmic meteor strike. So this, of course, broke the continent up, caused the Great Flood that we know of, and the worldwide destruction that's spoken of by cultures all around the world. Over the world, Thoth writes, then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing Earth's balance until only the Temple of Light was left standing on the great mountain on Udal, still rising out of the waters. Call to me then the Master, saying, gather ye together my people, take them by the arch ye have learned of far across the waters, until ye reach the land of the hairy barbarians, dwelling in the caves of the deserts. Follow there the plan that ye know of. Gathered I then my people, and entered the great ship of the Master. Upward we rose into the morning. This is not a sailing ship. This is a aerial craft of some sort, maybe what we think of as a UFO today, a spacecraft. He took them literally in an aerial ship. Now, we give you power over all the earth. So this is what the dweller's saying. You are free to give or to take away. Fly to the land of the children of Chem, that's where the hairy barbarians were. Into the spaceship I have brought all my records. I gathered all of my powers and many instruments of mighty magic. Up then we rose on wings of the morning. High we rose over the temple, leaving behind the three priests and the dweller, closing the pathway to the lords of the cycle. The lords of the cycles are living in the halls of Amenti. I raised to the light the children of Chem. I buried my spaceship, waiting for a time when man might be free. Over the spaceship, I erected a marker in the form of a lion, yet like a man. Aha, the Sphinx. There, beneath the image, rests my spaceship, to be brought forth when the need shall arise. Follow the pathway, solve my secrets. Unto you I have shown the way. So he picks up, dark beneath us lay the temple. Suddenly over it rose the waters, vanished from earth until the time appointed was the great temple. Fast we fled towards the sun of the morning, until beneath us lay the land of the children of Chem. They arrive in Egypt. Raging, they came with cudgels and spears, lifted in anger, seeking to slay and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. Then raised I my staff and directed a ray of vibration, striking them still in their tracks as fragments of stone of the mountain. So he froze them. Maybe with the wasps. Could be. Then spoke I to them in words calm and peaceful, telling them of the might of Atlantis, saying we were children of the sun and its messengers. Cowed I them by my display of magic science, until at my feet they groveled when I released them. So he froze them, he paralyzed them, and then he talked to them. They heard him, and when he was done, they were like, okay, you're the one. Salami, baloney. Okay, so long dwelt we in the land of Chem, long and yet long again, still until obeying the commands of the Master, meaning the dweller, I sent from me the sons of Atlantis. So he disperses the survivors, the priests and priestesses and the people from that holy island that were so knowledgeable. I sent them in many directions, that from the womb of time wisdom might rise again in her children. So he sent them across the seas. This is one of the, he sent them all over the world. This is one of the reasons why we have, pyramid building and some of these knowledge of the sun, the moon, some of the things, the Pleiades, Orion, in temples all around the world today. Long time dwelt I in the land of Chem, doing great works by the wisdom within me. Upward grew into the light of knowledge the children of Chem, or Egypt, watered by the rains of my wisdom. So he's the mover and shaker that makes Egypt great. Blasted I then a path to Amenti, the underground, so that I might retain my powers, living from age to age as a son of Atlantis, keeping the wisdom and preserving the records. Grew great the sons of Chem, conquering the people around them, growing slowly upwards in soul force. Now for time I go from among them into the dark halls of Amenti, deep in the halls of the earth, before the lords of the powers, face to face, once again with the dweller. So at the point that he's writing this, he's about to go back into the halls of Amenti. Raised I high over the entrance a doorway, a gateway leading down to Amenti. Few there would be with the courage to dare it. Few past the portal to dark Amenti. Raised over the passage, I, a mighty pyramid, using the power that overcomes earth force. In other words, levitation that overcomes gravity. Right. Deep and yet deeper placed I a force house or chamber. From it carved I a circular passage reaching almost to the great summit. So underneath the pyramid, he created a chamber with an energetic force field around it, a force field that protects the halls of Amenti that cannot be broken unless you have the codes or the keys to do so. And then he put a circular passage, a spiral passage, going all the way up to the top of the Great Pyramid here. Now, the Great White Brotherhood knows about this, and I have documents about in 1933 when they managed to get the stone open, go through the passage, go deep underground, and found a hall of records that was hermetically sealed with electric lights and everything, and saw discs that look like DVDs or CDs. Now, this is in 1933. We didn't have DVDs or CDs then. We didn't have magnetic knowledge stored in that form at that point. But there were entire boxes of these things of knowledge. So the Hall of Records may not be about statues and things that they can pilfer on the black market. It could literally be about magnetic imaging discs that contain the knowledge of Atlantis and that technology. There in the apex set I the crystal. This is the crystal on top of the pyramid, sending the ray into the time-space, drawing the force from out of the ether, concentrating upon the gateway to Amenti. Other chambers I built and left vacant to all seeming, yet hidden within them are the keys to Amenti. So what are the other chambers? The king's chambers, the queen's chamber, the grand gallery, the pit, all of that. He who in courage would dare the dark realms, let him be purified first by long fasting. Lie in the sarcophagus of stone in my chamber, then reveal I to him the great mysteries. Soon shall he follow to where I shall meet him. Even in the darkness of earth shall I meet him. I, Thoth, Lord of Wisdom, meet him and hold him and dwell with him always. Now, I've spent the night in the Great Pyramid. I took a group of about 22 people there a few years ago, and we started at Abu Simbel and made our way up the Nile and went through the chakra journey. Well, from the very first temple, because I knew certain resonant tones and forms, the hieroglyphics were pulsating off the walls, and a huge UFO showed up, and it followed us up the Nile. And the 3 hours my group was in the pyramid from 9 to 12 at night on the summer solstice, that UFO parked itself literally over the Great Pyramid the whole time. And I got when I came out of the Great Pyramid, and there were people, we were chanting in there, and because of the granite, and the crystals and the granite, there was this incredible resonating feel where there were these giant, people were seeing all these giant spiritual beings standing around us and behind us. And when we came out of the pyramid, two white doves flew down and alighted on my shoulders. And it was very, very powerful and magical, because we had been laying the codes of the dove, of the divine mother of peace, into the grids the whole time, clearing dark energies. So on another night, I wound up spending the night in the pyramid, and I spent probably about 20 or 30 minutes in the sarcophagus. It is definitely like a Stargate. It's a time-space portal. You can just feel it. It's like you can go into a whole altered space there. So I had some insight at that time about some hidden chambers, and I don't know if they're true or not. I have no way of checking, but it was a very powerful experience. That's what I would say. And, I'm sure I'll go back to Egypt. It may be a couple of years, but if any of you are interested in going, it's very powerful. You can tell I am a great student of the Egyptian mysteries, and you're always learning no matter how much you know, because there's a lot to learn. Thoth goes on, builded I the great pyramid, patterned after the pyramid of earth force, burning eternally so that it too might remain through the ages. In it, I builded my knowledge of magic science. Now, most of us don't know this, but it's granite on the inside, but it was limestone on the outside. And it was said that these limestone facings held mathematics, astronomy, knowledge of all of these things that we lost. And of course, what happened is when the tomb grave diggers went over there, the greedy people, they wound up breaking them off, trying to get into the pyramid. And then when the Christians started building, and then later the Muslims, they were like, hey, look, stones, let's use these. Okay. Totally oblivious. To me, this is sort of like baboons, trying to figure out what to do with, a computer. He left us all this knowledge, and we just pretty much erased it because of our superstition and limited thinking, basically. So we've lost that, okay? But what we do know is that just from mathematical research, the Great Pyramid contains mathematical information about the mass of the Earth, the radius of the Earth, the circumference of the Earth, Earth's volume or density, the speed of the Earth around the sun, and the velocity of light. So even though those casings are gone, we've been able to, now that we know those things, we've been able to find all of those things encoded in the actual architecture and mathematics of the pyramid itself. So he goes on to say, so that I might be here when again I return from Amenti, while I sleep in the halls of Amenti, my soul roaming free will incarnate and dwell among men in this form or another. In other words, he'll take human form as Hermes Trismegistus or Pythagoras or Sir Isaac Newton or, Nikola Tesla. Who knows who he's taken form as. Emissary on earth am I of the dweller, fulfilling his command so that many might be lifted. Now return I to the halls of Amenti, leaving behind me some of my wisdom. So this is the gist of tablet 1. Okay. And believe me, there's a lot more, but this presentation would have been hours long if I really did it all. So Thoth goes on to speak at length about the halls of Amenti, and these halls are really interesting. They are protected by an energetic force field, and they are built far below the Great Pyramid complex. Deep in Earth's heart lie the halls of Amenti, far neath the islands of sunken Atlantis. Well, that would seem to be like the mid-Atlantic ridge, right? Halls of the dead and halls of the living bathed in the fire of the infinite all. Okay, now this was how it was at the time of Atlantis, which is kind of over where the Azores were over to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Within the Halls of Amenti are, and this is me speaking, not him, I'm giving you a compilation or condensation. Within the Halls of Amenti are 32 masters who are essentially immortal beings who've come down from the higher realms. These are celestial teachers who formed giant bodies it should be from the ethers. These bodies are maintained by a fire crystal shaped like the flower of life. As they sleep, these beings, these powerful 32 beings, sometimes incarnate as human beings to awaken and guide humankind. 24 of them sit on thrones in a large circle. Closer to the center are the sacred seven or the sacred eight or the sacred nine. Sometimes he talks about them as the sacred seventh, then he'll say the sacred eight, and then he talks about the ninth really as being like the Lord of life. And they surround the fire crystal itself, and they're different. The 24 round on the outside, the 7 in the middle are the most important ones. Far in a past time, lost in the space-time, the children of light look down on the world. This is what he says about who they are. Seeing the children of men in their bondage, bound by the force that came from beyond. Now, I'm not sure what the came from beyond is, but basically, we got stuck down here and we forgot we were immortal souls. Knew they that only by freedom from bondage could man ever rise from the earth to the sun. Right. So how can we get free and realize we're not just physical bodies? Down they descended and created bodies of their own, taking the semblance of men as their own. The master of everything said after their forming, "We are they who were formed from the space dust, partaking of life from the infinite all, living in the world as children of men, like and yet unlike the children of men." Now, how do they form their bodies? There's a being known as Babaji over in India who is said literally to have coalesced the molecules of his body so that he appeared to be about a 21-year-old young man. And this was seen happening in a cave. A young girl woke up and saw this light coming from the cave, and she got up at night and crossed the river and went to the cave and literally saw him bringing the molecules of his body together. Okay. Now, Babaji has, incarnated many times. Many years I was privileged to go to hear the first 2 Americans that went over to see him. Their experience was extraordinary. Not only, he got everyone up and had them bathe at 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, and he had them working. And this old guy kept dying all the time, and he kept bringing him back to life. I mean, over and over again. When they first got there, they were climbing up to the top of the temple where Babaji was supposed to be, and they were greeted by this man sitting at the base of the pyramid, or the temple. And when they got to the top, the same man was at the top of the temple, and that was Babaji. They said he could speak any language of the world. They said that when they were there, they were only there for 5 days, that they brought a boy who was blind, and Babaji spit in his eyes, and the boy could suddenly see. But Babaji said he didn't come to heal people. That wasn't his purpose. Or bring people back from the dead. He could do that, of course, but that wasn't his major purpose. So is it possible to create a body out of the ethers, space dust of the universe? Yeah, there are precedents for this. So these beings, I think, are so far above us in consciousness that they could certainly choose to do that. So living in the world as children of men, like and yet unlike the children of men. There in the circle from aeon to aeon sit the great masters, living a life not known among men. Most of us don't know anything about this, do we? There in the halls of life they lie sleeping. Free flows their souls through the bodies of men. So free flows their soul through the bodies of men. Maybe they speak to us in our dream state. Maybe they commune with us as spiritual teachers on the inner planes. Maybe they choose to take human form. Uh, Even though their essence is down there, they choose to incarnate to bring up consciousness. That's possible. Time after time, while their bodies lie sleeping, incarnate they in the bodies of men. Yeah. Teaching and guiding onward and upward out of the darkness into the light. I mean, it's talking about love for humankind. Lord have mercy. You've been down there for, what, over 12,000 years, maybe 22,000 years. That's a pretty big commitment. This is a pretty interesting picture I found. The 24 round, the firestone of light, and then the 7. Now, if you remember, there's all these stories about the sacred 7. I remember Emerson's poem, Brahma. I don't know if you guys ever read that one, but it's a very interesting poem. It goes, if the red slayer thinks he slays, or if the slain think he is slain, they know not well the subtle ways I keep and pass and turn again. In other words, whether you're the victim or the victimizer, the warrior or the person that got killed, if you identify with either one, you've missed it. Who we are is beyond the play of light and shadow down here. If the red slayer thinks he slays, yeah, right. Okay, so let me see. The red slayers, I have to remember it in order. They reckon ill who leave me out. When me they fly, I am the wings. I am the doubter and the doubt, and I the hymn the Brahmin sings. The dead gods pine for my abode, and pine in vain the sacred 7. But thou, meek lover of the good, find me and turn thy back on heaven. Now, what the heck does all that mean? Well, the name of the poem is Brahman, which is creator, the creator of the universe. So I think what he's saying is if we're in either polarity, we have missed the point that the creator is all things, that the spirit of the divine lives in every one of us, no matter what our drama is, no matter what our part in the play is, that if we can connect with that one, then we can get outside, we can step out of the matrix, we can step outside of the timeline. We're all like in a timeline. We keep incarnating, reincarnating, trying to learn these lessons with no handbook. And if we could just slide out of our mother's womb with like a little handbook that says, you are here, this is who you are, this is your past history, and this is your mission this time. But we come in here with amnesia, and this is one of the reasons why we it's so hard to stay on track. This is one of the reasons why I've done over 6,000 soul readings for people around the world, because I can help to remind them of who they are and help to get them on track. So anyway, I thought this was really interesting. I don't know who painted it, but I thought it was a cool one. For Thoth, or these masters, to continue their immortality, they must each spend 100 years out of 1,000 in a sleep state bathed by the crystal. So when Thoth talks about going down to the Halls of Amenti, he's talking about the fact that he's going to disappear for a period of a century or more before he can even come back. Okay. And who knows, he might go down there for 1,000 years at a time. But in order to maintain the same immortal body, he has to be bathed by this crystal. That's some crystal, huh? Now, this is very interesting because in the late 1800s, they found what was known as the Serapeum. The Serapeum was originally the temple of Serapis. Serapis was really Osiris. That's really what he was. But once the Greeks came over, they couldn't just call him Osiris. They had to call him something else. So they called him Serapis. And so there were 40,000 volumes there that were destroyed. Well, in the late 1800s, we found the Serapeum, and it was near and under the Saqqara pyramid, that step pyramid. Now, interestingly enough, we have discovered 24 gigantic 100-ton granite coffins. Look at the size of this, found near Saqqara in the underground Serapeum. Look at the size of this. This is like a mind blower, okay? The base is 70 tons, the lid is 30 tons, and the engineering on this, they say, is absolutely precise. The ancient Egyptians did not have the technology for this, but the fact that there are 24 of them really got my attention. Look at that. Holy schmoly. So this, I don't think they know what they are. They were, when they found them, all the lids were moved back, except one that tomb robbers had broken into, and it was blasted open and there was nothing inside. Okay. So imagine how much TNT it'd take to blast this open. I mean, it's incredible. So once again, let's just take a look at this, because what happened is in this one, he gives the overview. In this, he goes into depth into Halls of Amenti, and each one of these he goes into depth, including about the 7 lords. I could be teaching this for the next 8 hours to really go through this whole book, but I've given you kind of the overview of it. And, you know, if it's something that interests you, you want to go on to study it yourself. I would like to share some images with you. This is an illustration, but everything else I'm going to show you is actually a photograph. Today, we're just beginning to locate some of these ruins of this lost civilization. This is a photograph of Atlantean ruins off the coast of Cuba. Off the coast of Cuba. Pyramids, cities off the coast of Cuba. Near Cuba. Off the coast of the Bahamas. That's Hathor, of course. You recognize. Off the Azores. This went down 22,000 years ago. This is in the 3rd age, not the 4th age. There's a pyramid back here, a pyramid here. This is off the coast of Spain and Portugal. This is not a painting. This is a photograph. So that empire went down about 11,700, 800 years ago. Today, all that remains to us, of course, are legends. Love this. Now, isn't this beautiful? Thus speak I, Thoth, of my wisdom, for a man is a fire burning bright through the night, never is quenched in the veil of the darkness, never is quenched by the veil of the night. Into men's heart I looked by my wisdom, found them not free from the bondage of strife, free from the toils, the fire, O my brother, lest it be buried in the shadows of night. Hark ye, O man, and listen to this wisdom, where do name and form cease? Only in consciousness. Invisible, an infinite force of radiant bright. The forms that ye create by brightening thy vision are truly effects that follow thy cause. What is he saying? He's saying that we are beyond our bodies, that consciousness is invisible, only consciousness invisible, and an infinite force of radiant bright. In other words, we're light beings, okay, beyond the physical form. The forms that you create down here, what you're going to manifest in your life by brightening thy vision, when we pull off the veils, are truly effects that follow thy cause. In other words, if the cause is jealousy, the effect is backstabbing and drama. If the cause is seeking truth, the effect is having the way of consciousness open to you. Our intention, our cause, opens our reality for good or for ill. So we should remember that, okay? Remember, because the universe is conscious, the universe is mental, and our intention makes a difference. Man is a star bound to a body until in the end he is freed through his strife. That's all that suffering we go through down here. Only by struggle and toiling thy utmost shall the star within thee bloom out in new life. He who knows the commencement of all things, free is his star from the realm of the night. What does it mean? He who knows the commencement, he who knows the beginning of all things. He who knows that the divine consciousness is the beginning, that everything is created through vibration, the word, through sound, through light, through intention, through consciousness. He who knows the commencement, the beginning of all things, free is his soul, the star, from the realm of the night, from death, ultimately, from loss of consciousness. Follow thine heart during thy lifetime. Do thou more than is commanded of thee. When thou hast gained riches, follow thine heart. This is awkward, isn't it? For all these are of no avail if thine heart be weary. In other words, no matter how much money you make, if you're unhappy, what are you doing? Money isn't the goal. The goal is to be happy and to follow your heart, because your heart will lead you, if it's open to love, it'll lead you in the right direction. The wise man lets his heart overflow, but keeps silent his mouth. O man, listen to the voice of wisdom, listen to the voice of light. Mysteries there are in the cosmos that unveiled fill the world with their light. Let he who would be free from the bonds of darkness first divine the material from the immaterial, the fire from the earth. In other words, spirit from matter. For know ye that as earth descends to earth, so also fire ascends unto fire and becomes one with fire. He who knows the fire that is within himself, the soul, shall ascend into the eternal fire and dwell in it eternally. In other words, realize who you really are. You are a light being having a physical experience, challenging though it may be. But the more we live into that true presence of who we are, we will join with that presence because we'll seek it. Thoth taught that an initiate should become balanced or androgynous, joined in inner union. That means we must balance our masculine and feminine. Most of us run around just seeking this outer mate, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're now moving in a time where we have to find the inner mate. We have to honor the masculine and feminine within us and bring them into balance. This is called the great work. And you can see the female here within the male. This is the Hierophant or initiate, okay? And he's passed through all the ages. Here's Aquarius the man, Leo the lion, Taurus the bull, Scorpio the eagle. This is an elephant. He's remembered who he is, okay? And he's claimed his power. That's the bull. He's activated his 5-star nature, that inner star within. And he's joined his masculine and feminine into one. This is the true path of spiritual enlightenment. And, heart and head joined in union. This is a path that brings us to the place of the magician or the mystic or the initiate, the master initiate, as Thoth was. What can we do? We can love ourselves. We can dissolve our blocks. We can forgive others. We can learn patience and kindness and love. We can learn to become a conscious co-worker with spirit. We can help our fellow beings, and that includes animal beings, plant beings, and human beings, not just the humans, to accelerate and move to the next level of compassion, wisdom, and healing. And love always accelerates everyone around us, including our animals. When we do this, we free ourselves from the matrix and we claim our own spark of divinity, living in the here and now, and we become truly enlightened beings, one with the cosmos and with ourselves, true to our true light nature, remembering who we really are.